For centuries, the world has known the story of Adam and Eve through the Bible we grew up with, but deep in the mountains of Ethiopia, a far older manuscript tells a version unlike anything you've heard before. Hidden in the ancient Guizi language, the lost book of Adam and Eve reveals a chilling truth, one that speaks of forbidden knowledge, angelic wars, and a prophecy so terrifying it was kept from the world for over 1,000 years. This is the secret they never wanted you to see. For most of the world, the story of Adam and Eve comes from the familiar pages of Genesis, a brief, poetic account of a perfect garden, a forbidden tree, a serpent, and humanity's tragic fall. But tucked away in the highlands of Ethiopia, in the shelves of ancient monasteries carved into rock, lies a version of this story far older, longer, and more mysterious than the one most people know. Known as the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, sometimes called the first and second books of Adam and Eve, this text is preserved in the Guizi language within the Ethiopian biblical tradition. Unlike Genesis, it is not just a few paragraphs long. It is a sprawling, vivid narrative that begins immediately after Adam and Eve's expulsion from Eden and follows them through years of struggle, divine warnings, and strange encounters with supernatural beings. What makes this Ethiopian version so significant is not just its age, but what it contains, passages that were left out of the Western Bible entirely. And some of those passages carry a warning so dark that scholars believe this is why the text was suppressed in other Christian traditions. How the Ethiopian Bible preserves lost stories. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church holds one of the most complete biblical canons in the world. Where most Western Bibles have 66 books, the Ethiopian canon contains over 80, including works like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, both considered apocryphal elsewhere. Because Ethiopia's Christian tradition developed largely independent of Rome and Constantinople, it preserved many early Jewish and Christian writings in their original form. These works were translated into Guizi between the 4th and 6th centuries and guarded in monasteries for over 1,000 years. Among these writings is the lost book of Adam and Eve, which likely originated in the early centuries of the Christian era and was based on much older Jewish oral traditions. While fragments of it survived in other languages, Ethiopia kept the complete version, hidden from the outside world until modern scholars began translating it in the 19th century. What the lost book actually says. The lost book of Adam and Eve picks up the moment Adam and Eve are cast out of Eden. Rather than ending the story with their exile, it describes in detail the terror, grief, and confusion they experience as they enter the harsh, unfamiliar world. The tone is strikingly human. Adam and Eve weep, fast, pray, and repeatedly plead with God to return to the garden. But there's another key figure who appears almost immediately: Satan. In Genesis, the serpent disappears after tempting Eve. In the Ethiopian account, the tempter returns again and again, taking new forms, devising new traps, and waging a relentless war against humanity. The book describes multiple incidents in which Satan attempts to kill Adam and Eve, deceive them with false visions, or lure them into disobeying God in ways that would destroy their souls. One chilling scene describes Satan disguising himself as a bright angel of light to trick them into climbing a high mountain, only to push them off. In another, he tempts them with false promises of returning to Eden if they follow his strange rituals. Over and over, the text warns that the battle for the human soul is not a one-time event, but a lifetime struggle. The terrifying secret. The most unsettling aspect of a lost book is not simply that Satan continues to attack Adam and Eve. It is the reason he does so, as revealed in the Ethiopian text. According to the book, Satan's hatred for humanity began long before the Garden of Eden. In a passage absent from Genesis, God commands the angels to bow before Adam, the first human made in his image. All obey except one, Satan. In his pride, he refuses to bow to a being made of dust, insisting that he is greater because he was created from fire. This defiance leads to his expulsion from heaven. From that moment, he vows to corrupt, destroy, and reclaim dominion over the earth by dragging humanity down with him. But the terrifying secret revealed in the Ethiopian manuscript goes further. It warns that Satan's war against humanity will not end until the final judgment, and that he will succeed in leading most of the world astray. The text repeatedly emphasizes that his strategies will grow more subtle, more convincing, and more widespread as time passes, to the point where even believers will be in danger of being deceived. The prophecy embedded in the book suggests that in the last days, Satan will appear not as an obvious enemy, but as a savior figure, gaining the trust of nations before unleashing chaos. This messianic deception, the manuscript warns, will cause a spiritual fall even greater than the one in Eden. Why this text was left out? Why would a story so vivid and morally urgent be excluded from most Bibles? Scholars have suggested several reasons. Too detailed, too speculative. Early church leaders were cautious about including writings that expanded biblical stories with details not universally accepted as inspired. The Lost Book includes dialogue, events, and cosmological ideas not found elsewhere in Scripture. Potential for fear and panic. The Ethiopian version paints Satan as an active, daily threat, far more than a symbolic adversary. Its prophecies about a future global deception could have been seen as destabilizing for new Christian communities. Conflict with doctrinal simplicity. By offering a backstory to Satan's fall and motivations, the text risks shifting theological focus away from Christ's victory toward a fascination with the devil's schemes. Theological politics. The Ethiopian Church's preservation of the text is linked to its unique independence. In other Christian centers, debates over which books to include often led to politically motivated exclusions. Whatever the reason, the fact remains, outside of Ethiopia, most Christians never heard this expanded Adam and Eve story, nor its warnings. Lessons hidden in the story. Beneath the supernatural drama, the Ethiopian lost book of Adam and Eve carries deep moral and spiritual lessons. Temptation is persistent. The text shows that evil does not give up after one victory or one defeat. It adapts, waits, and tries again, often in unexpected ways. Discernment is crucial. Satan's most dangerous weapon is deception. The book portrays him as able to appear as an angel, a friend, or even a messenger of God. The warning is clear. Not every bright light comes from heaven. The struggle is universal. Adam and Eve's trials are symbolic of every human life. Exile from innocence, daily battles against temptation, and the longing to return to God's presence. Hope is not lost, even in the darkest passages. The text reassures that God continues to guide, protect, and eventually promise redemption to those who endure. What this means today. If the Ethiopian text is to be believed, the fall of Adam and Eve was only the opening battle in an unending war. That war continues, not in ancient gardens, but in modern minds, cultures, and systems. Its terrifying secret that humanity's greatest enemy will not always appear as an enemy may be the most relevant warning of all. In an age of misinformation, false saviors, and seductive ideologies, the Ethiopian version's call for vigilance feels prophetic. Moreover, this text reminds us that much of human spiritual history has been shaped by which books were chosen and which were left out. The Western world's image of Eden is tidy and symbolic. Ethiopia's is raw, dangerous, and urgent. Rediscovery and translation. When European scholars first encountered the complete Guizi manuscripts in the 19th century, they were stunned by the detail and drama of the story. Translations into English, French, and German began appearing, often labeled as apocryphal or pseudepigraphal, scholarly terms meaning outside the accepted canon. Since then, the book has become a subject of study for historians of religion, folklorists, and even conspiracy theorists, who see in its warnings a coded message for the present age. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church continues to read it alongside other ancient writings, considering it a valuable, if not strictly canonical, part of its sacred heritage. The secret that refuses to stay buried. For centuries, the lost book of Adam and Eve was a treasure locked away in the highlands of Ethiopia, shielded from the world by geography, tradition, and secrecy. Preserved in the ancient Guizi language on parchment manuscripts, this extraordinary text told a version of humanity's first story unlike any other in mainstream religious tradition. In Europe, the story of Adam and Eve began and ended in a few short chapters of Genesis, an archetypal tale of paradise lost and the origins of human suffering. In Ethiopia, however, the narrative stretched across entire volumes, filled with supernatural confrontations, divine instructions, and prophecies that reached far into the future. It was not just a longer story. It was a more dangerous one. The hidden pathways of preservation. To understand how such a text could survive in Ethiopia but disappear elsewhere, we must look at the history of Ethiopian Christianity itself. Christianity took root in Ethiopia in the 4th century CE, making it one of the earliest Christian nations in the world. It developed largely outside the control of the Roman Empire and later the European Catholic and Protestant movements. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church inherited a vast library of religious literature, not just the books we know as the Old and New Testaments, but other writings revered by early Jewish and Christian communities. Among these were the Book of Enoch Jubilees and the text now called the Conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, or the first and second books of Adam and Eve. Monks painstakingly copied these texts by hand for centuries. They stored them in monasteries carved into cliffs, hidden in caves, or placed inside sacred churches that were accessible only to the most trusted members of the community. Because Ethiopia's rugged terrain and strong cultural identity shielded it from outside domination for long stretches of history, many of these ancient writings remained untouched by the editorial processes that shaped Western Bibles. A story that never ended. In the Genesis most of the world knows, the story of Adam and Eve moves quickly. Creation, temptation, exile, and the birth of their children. After the expulsion from Eden, the serpent disappears from a stage, and the narrative shifts toward Cain and Abel. But in the Ethiopian version, the moment they leave the garden is only the beginning. The lost book portrays Adam and Eve as vulnerable, grief-stricken, and constantly targeted by an adversary who refuses to let them live in peace. That adversary is not just a serpent. He is Satan himself, appearing in multiple forms, devising elaborate schemes to harm, mislead, or kill the first humans. One scene describes Satan disguising himself as a beautiful angel to lure Adam and Eve into a deadly trap. Another depicts him sending terrifying visions to break their faith. The book reveals his deep hatred for humanity, which it traces back to a cosmic rebellion. When God created Adam, he commanded the angels to honor him as the image-bearer of God. Satan refused, and for his pride was cast out of heaven. From that day forward, the text says, he vowed to corrupt the human race and reclaim dominion over the earth. The terrifying prophecy. The most chilling element of the lost book is not simply its account of Satan's persistence, but its warning about the future. The manuscript speaks of an age to come when the enemy of humanity will grow more cunning than ever, appearing not as a destroyer, but as a savior. It warns that in the last days, deception will be so convincing that even the faithful will be in danger of believing lies. Nations will unite under promises of peace, justice, and prosperity. But behind this mask will be the same ancient adversary who first whispered in Eden. For the monks who preserved it, this was not a myth to entertain. It was a spiritual alarm, a coded message meant to prepare future generations for a battle that had not yet reached its climax. Why it stayed hidden. There are several reasons why this text never made it into the mainstream Bible outside of Ethiopia. Theological complexity. The lost book fills in backstory and details that go far beyond Genesis. It blends history, prophecy, and spiritual warfare in a way that challenges the simplicity of the canon used in other Christian traditions. Fear of public reaction. The idea that humanity is in a constant, active struggle with a supernatural enemy could have been seen as destabilizing, especially in societies seeking to unify under religious authority. Suspicion of Apocrypha. From the earliest centuries, church councils in Rome, Alexandria, and elsewhere were cautious about books not universally accepted. While Ethiopia embraced a larger canon, others trimmed it down. Cultural and political isolation. Simply put, the text stayed in Ethiopia because Ethiopia stayed independent for much of its history. Without foreign church domination, it kept its traditions intact. The modern rediscovery. It wasn't until the 19th century that European scholars began to gain access to these hidden treasures. Travelers, missionaries, and linguists visiting Ethiopia came across Guizi manuscripts containing stories they had never read before. When the lost book of Adam and Eve was translated into English and other languages, reactions ranged from fascination to alarm. Some saw it as a priceless window into ancient religious imagination. Others dismissed it as pious fiction. And some, reading its dire warnings about a global deception, saw in it a prophecy unfolding in their own time. The rise of the Internet in the late 20th and early 21st centuries brought the text out of academic circles and into the public sphere. Now anyone could read it, study it, and draw their own conclusions, something that would have been impossible even a few decades earlier. What the book teaches. The lost book of Adam and Eve is more than an ancient curiosity. Its lessons are surprisingly relevant today. Temptation is ongoing. Evil doesn't stop after one failure or success. It adapts and evolves, looking for new openings. Not all light comes from God. The text repeated warnings about Satan appearing as an angel of light speak directly to the problem of false appearances in our own age. Spiritual battles are unseen, but real. The Ethiopian narrative treats the struggle between good and evil as something happening constantly in the background of human life. Hope still endures. Despite their many trials, Adam and Eve are never abandoned. God's presence and promises remain a constant thread. The secret in the open. Today, the secret is no longer hidden in monastery libraries. It has been scanned, translated, and uploaded to digital archives. But in a sense, it is still buried, not under stone or in the folds of parchment, but under the noise of our distracted age. For most people, the warnings of the lost book are just another obscure religious curiosity. Yet for those who read it closely, it carries an unsettling relevance, a reminder that deception, once unleashed, rarely announces itself as evil. It dresses itself in the language of progress, the symbols of goodness, and the promises of a better world. If the prophecy is to be believed, the final act of human history will be marked not by obvious destruction, but by a seduction so complete that many will embrace it willingly. Why the world is listening now. Why is this ancient Ethiopian text finding new audiences today? Perhaps because its themes resonate with modern concerns. In an age of global misinformation, the idea of a world deceived by appearances feels disturbingly plausible. The book's portrayal of a battle that began in Eden and continues to this day echoes the unease many feel about moral and cultural shifts. Its preservation outside Western control appeals to those who distrust official narratives and seek alternative histories. In other words, the lost book of Adam and Eve is not just a relic. It's a mirror, reflecting fears, hopes, and questions that have never truly gone away. The legacy of the Ethiopian monks. Without the quiet dedication of Ethiopian monks, this story might have been lost forever. For generations, they guarded it not as a weapon of controversy, but as a lamp for the faithful, something to illuminate the dangers of the world and the faithfulness of God. They copied it by hand, prayed over it, and read it alongside other sacred writings, seeing in it a continuity between the first human struggles and their own. To them, the Garden of Eden was not a far-off myth. It was the starting point of a journey they were still walking. The secret that refuses to stay buried. The lost book of Adam and Eve spent centuries in the shadows, passed quietly from scribe to scribe, from monk to monk. It outlasted wars, famines, and invasions, waiting for an age when it could be read by the whole world. Now that moment has come. Whether you see it as divine revelation, ancient legend, or prophetic warning, its survival alone is remarkable. Its words, once whispered in the candlelit halls of mountain monasteries, now echo across the digital landscape. And in those words lies a challenge. Will we treat it as a curiosity from a distant past or as a message for the present? Because if the text is right, the greatest danger to humanity is not the loss of Eden, but the moment we are offered a counterfeit paradise and are too blind to tell the difference. What you've just heard is only a glimpse of what the ancient Ethiopian texts reveal. The lost book of Adam and Eve doesn't just rewrite the beginning. It warns of an ending the world is not ready to face. If these words survived centuries of concealment, imagine what else might still be hidden. Share this video so others can uncover the truth, and tell us in the comments, do you believe these secrets were kept to protect us or to control us? Subscribe, because the next revelation may be even more shocking than this one.